Britain may have sidestepped the first wave of Donald Trump's trade war tariffs, but the approach itself could trigger unintended economic consequences, as Trump has now leveraged tariffs on China, on Mexico, and on Canada. And this trade policy is an exercise in both economic myopia and ethical blindness, and power. While he insists that tariffs will restore American industry and protect domestic jobs, history suggests otherwise. The UK, for now, has avoided direct tariffs largely because the US doesn't run as high a trade deficit with Britain compared to the EU. However, the fundamental flaws in Trump's approach threaten broader economic stability, including for the UK. President Trump has repeatedly described the $213 billion US trade deficit with the European Union as an atrocity. He believes that tariffs will redress the imbalance, and his belief is grounded in a fundamental misunderstanding of trade dynamics. Trade deficits are not necessarily indicative of economic failure, but rather reflect consumption patterns, currency values, and comparative advantages. The US imports more from the EU because of its demand for high-quality European goods, including pharmaceuticals, automobiles, and advanced machinery. Meanwhile, American exports, primarily oil, gas, and financial services, are structured differently, making direct parity difficult to establish. The UK, which has a more balanced trade relationship with the US, has so far avoided tariffs, but Trump's rhetoric, labelling Britain as out of line, suggests that this exemption is precarious at best. If Trump's protectionist stance hardens, the UK could find itself in the firing line, particularly in sectors like cars and finance. And the EU has already made it clear that it will respond firmly to any US-imposed tariffs, and this likely means retaliatory tariffs on American goods, which could escalate into a full-scale trade war. Countries like Ireland, which exports nearly half of its non-EU goods to the US, stand to be particularly affected. Conversely, nations such as Germany, which imports significant US oil and gas, have some leverage. Retaliatory tariffs could create cascading disruptions across global supply chains. For instance, German automobile makers rely heavily on American-made components, and European pharmaceutical firms depend on US market access. The introduction of tariffs could lead to higher costs, supply shortages, and economic contraction on both sides of the Atlantic. The former IMF chief economist Maurice Obstfeld has warned that tariffs could throw the world into recession, and the World Bank has also reiterated that tariffs are a significant threat to global growth. Trump's belief that tariffs will make America stronger ignores the broader economic consequences, and there are four major consequences. Higher consumer prices, as tariffs function as a tax on imports, which businesses pass on to consumers. Everyday goods, from cars to groceries, will become more expensive for American households. Market instability, as the imposition of tariffs has already led to a slump in Asian and European stock markets. As tariffs take effect, investment confidence will wane, potentially leading to capital flight and economic contraction. The third point is the supply chain will be disrupted. Many industries operate on just-in-time supply chains, and tariffs create inefficiencies, force businesses to seek costlier alternatives, and may lead to layoffs. And finally, US inflation and interest rates, increased tariffs on essential imports mean higher production costs, driving inflation, and the Federal Reserve would likely respond with interest rate hikes, further dampening economic growth. Trump's tariffs are not merely an economic miscalculation, they are also an ethical gamble, and his justification that tariffs will curb illegal immigration and stop the fentanyl crisis is a distortion of economic tools for political ends. Trade policy is not a viable mechanism for addressing complex social issues such as drug trafficking and border security. Moreover, Trump's aggressive stance undermines the principles of fair trade and international cooperation. He has used emergency powers under the International Emergency Economic Powers Act, a law traditionally reserved for national security crises, to impose these tariffs. And this represents an alarming precedent in which economic policy is wielded as a unilateral weapon rather than a tool for mutual prosperity. The UK's temporary exemption from tariffs is a double-edged sword. While it offers short-term relief, it also places Britain in a vulnerable diplomatic position. The UK must balance its post-Brexit trade ambitions with the need to avoid becoming collateral damage in a US-EU trade war. If Trump expands his tariffs, British exports, particularly in finance, pharmaceuticals and manufacturing, could be targeted. Keir Starmer has maintained that his government will work out trade differences with the US, but this assumes that Trump is open to negotiation. And given his erratic decision-making, Britain should prepare for the possibility of tariffs, especially if Trump's economic policies continue to escalate global tensions. Trump's tariffs are a short-term political gambit masquerading as economic policy. While they may appeal to protectionist instincts, they ignore the interconnected nature of global trade, and rather than strengthening the US economy, they risk triggering inflation, they risk triggering market volatility, they risk global recession. It is an act of stupidity. Britain, for now, has dodged the first round of tariffs, but it would be naive to assume immunity. If Trump continues down this path, the world, including the UK, must brace for economic turbulence. It's as if we're taking advice from Kemi Badenoch. Brace! Brace! We have Putin on the one hand, causing chaos. Now we have Trump on the other hand, causing chaos. And little voices in the middle screaming, "It's going to be a disaster!" In this particular case, frankly, Kemi Badenoch is absolutely right.